Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. My name is Clara, and today I'm going to be talking to you about my chosen dissertation topic, Beyond the Fantasy, Exploring Self-Awareness and Empathy in Dungeons & Dragons. Before we get started with the presentation, I just want to tell you a bit about me. My name is Clara and I'm a full-time student. I've been at Bangor University for the past 5 years now. I completed my undergraduate degree in psychology here and I'm currently finishing up my master's in counselling. I am an avid fantasy enjoyer. I love all things fantasy. When I was growing up, I spent a lot of time reading fantasy books, and I still do now, but reading them when I was younger really fueled my love for the fantasy genre, so it's no surprise that I would love playing a game like Dungeons & Dragons. I put occasional Dungeons & Dragons player as I haven't played in around about a year, but I'm very much hoping to get back into it soon. Anyway, enough about me, time to get into what you're here to see. To start off, I want to tell you a bit about how this presentation is going to look today. We'll spend some time going through the introduction, introducing some background, relevant research, and information about the current study. Then we'll be looking at the methods, who were our participants, what did we use to conduct the study, and how we did it. Then we'll move on to the results, what did our study show us, and lastly, the discussion, what do these results mean, what are the implications in the real world, some potential limitations and future research considerations. All photos in this presentation are mine. What exactly is self-awareness and empathy? Self-awareness is described as the capacity to understand information about yourself, your thoughts, feelings, your personality, and where yourself becomes the focus of your attention, as so eloquently put by Morin in 2011. Becoming self-aware typically involves learning more about yourself from engaging in reflective practices like journaling, for example, a great way to dissect your thoughts and process your emotions. According to Watson in 2016, empathy is the bedrock of psychotherapy. Empathy is the ability to understand the feelings of other people, really connecting with someone through their words and their feelings, essentially feeling another person's feelings like they're your own. Why self-awareness and empathy for this study? Well, for a very long time, both self-awareness and empathy have been described as key counselling skills, being called critical and essential skills for all counsellors to have, to be able to connect with clients at a higher level. However, according to Duda, there are ongoing conversations really debating how critical empathy is as a skill for a counsellor. Additionally, both Urich and Peterser et al. State in their research that there is very little research into the improvement and development of self-awareness and empathy. According to those researchers, there doesn't seem to be many training methods in place to increase self-awareness and empathy skills for counsellors, with most suggestions being for counsellors to engage with reflective practice, like journaling, or to engage with personal and professional development groups or personal therapy. But what is the link to role-playing games? Some previous research conducted by Howell, Mirilainen, and Rivers et al. Implies that playing fantasy role-playing games, or RPGs as I will refer to them throughout the presentation, seem to increase self-awareness and empathy for many players. In particular, Rivers et al.'s study explored empathy using the Davies IRI survey, given to people who play fantasy RPGs. The study found that empathy levels for these participants were significantly higher in comparison to empathy levels for the general population, heavily implying that fantasy RPGs seem to be a useful tool for increasing empathy for fantasy RPG players. Additionally, roleplay in general is a key element to some techniques in play therapy, an alternative type of therapy mostly centered around children but also for adults. Play therapy can provide many benefits, as emphasized by Kukurikos et al., with Hartwig et al. And Henrik and Worthington conducting studies exploring RPGs like Dungeons & Dragons as play therapy interventions, linking play therapy benefits like increased self-awareness and empathy to RPG games like Dungeons & Dragons. What is Dungeons & Dragons? Well, Dungeons & Dragons, or D&D as it will be referred to throughout the presentation, is the most popular fantasy tabletop role-playing game, or TTRPG. It's a collaborative game played with other people and traditionally played with a set of dice, pen and paper. However, playing D&D online through software like Discord, Skype and Zoom is becoming increasingly popular, with the COVID-19 pandemic really boosting it as a method of play. In D&D, you and other players explore a world created by the Dungeon Master or Game Master, but referred to as DM or GM throughout the presentation. D&D is incredibly versatile, with unlimited character creation aspects and world building. Your character is placed in this fantasy world that you and your fellow adventurers must explore, and interact with non-player characters to complete the story. So we discussed Dungeons & Dragons being used in play therapy, but how about Dungeons & Dragons as a training tool for counsellors? Brings us to the aims of the current study. At its core, this study simply aims to explore self-awareness and empathy in Dungeons & Dragons. Additionally, I aim to also explore the benefits of D&D from a general population perspective and a counselling perspective. I also wanted to explore D&D to be used as a potential training tool for counsellors, particularly trainee counsellors. Moving on to the methods section. We initially had 12 participants, however 2 withdrew over time, which left us with 10 participants in total. We had participants from the UK, USA and Japan. The study had the inclusion criteria of all participants being over the age of 18 and that they've had previous experience of playing Dungeons & Dragons. The study was advertised on social media platforms Instagram, X, formerly Twitter, Reddit and Discord, as well as word of mouth to researchers, friends and family. Participants completed an initial interest questionnaire and were recruited via volunteer sampling. As the participants in the study were selected on a first-come, first-served basis, we took the first 12 participants who signed up. The study takes on a qualitative research design, using a semi-structured interview conducted on Microsoft Teams. The interview contained 14 questions and was semi-structured, meaning that we, as the researchers, were free to ask follow-up questions and to ask questions regarding clarification or for them to further explain their points. The initial interest questionnaire contained information about the study, asked for some demographic information, availability and contact details to arrange the interview, as well as a consent form. So how did we do it then? We started off by advertising the study on social media platforms mentioned earlier and through word of mouth. The advert contained a link for the initial interest questionnaire on Side Toolkit. Participants who completed the questionnaire and met the inclusion criteria were then emailed and invited to the interview. Once a date had been set, we ensured that the researchers were not conducting interviews with the participants that they knew personally. During the interview, we verbally confirmed that the participants consented to be in the study and that they also consented to the interview being recorded and transcribed. We verbally confirmed that the participant had met the inclusion criteria requirements before beginning, and we gave them some information about the study and began the interview. The interview had 14 questions, with 12 being considered core questions and the last 2 being confirmation questions, asking the participants if they had anything to add or had any questions for us. We then finished the interview by verbally debriefing them and providing them with signposting to relevant services. Once the interview was completed, we sent the participants an email thanking them for their time, reminding them of their right to withdraw, and explaining the next steps. We then, as researchers, had 2 to 3 weeks to create and edit the transcripts for the participants. When they were completed, we sent them to the participants to gain confirmation and further consent that the completed transcript was okay to use in the study. Here we had one participant reach out to withdraw, and the other participant failed to reply to the email with the transcript and the follow-up email that was sent 2 weeks later. Therefore, their data was removed from the study. Once we got confirmation from the participants, we sent them a debrief email, also containing signposting to relevant services and including information about withdrawals. Once this was complete, we began analysing the transcripts for themes and sub-themes, which involved reading and rereading the transcripts multiple times. Next up are the results. Here is a brief overview and breakdown of the themes and sub-themes that I found from the transcripts. On the left is a list of the themes, with player and character, self-awareness, empathy and benefits, and risk. And as you can see, each theme has several sub-themes. For theme 1, the sub-themes are character, personality, and safe space. For theme 2, the sub-themes are reflection and personal growth. For theme 3, the sub-themes are empathy towards others and empathy towards marginalised groups. And for theme 4, the sub-themes are creative benefits, social benefits, escapism, and risks. Next few slides break down each theme, giving example quotes from the participants relevant to the themes. So let's begin with theme 1. For the first sub-theme of theme 1, participants describe their characters as though they were other people, who also experiences growth and develop a deeper understanding with over time. Participants stated they were able to put themselves into their character's frame of reference, and other participants mentioned that they act as their character, implying that D&D facilitates the ability to understand other points of view. The second sub-theme of Theme 1 explored personality. We found that all participants incorporated aspects of their personalities into their characters, with P4 cherry-picking traits, and other participants mentioning specific aspects of themselves like race, sexual identity, and certain personality traits that they give their character as well. The final sub-theme explored the idea that D&D can create a safe space for all participants. Participants stated that being with friends and having a good DM can create a safe space for them to explore aspects of themselves that they may not get to explore in the real world. Some described experimenting with their characters to explore other personality traits, and some explained that the safe space allowed them to explore intense emotions like grief, and for some to cry during sessions. Next are some example quotes from Theme 2. For the first sub-theme of reflection, around half of the participants expressed that D&D has had an impact on their reflection in relation to their characters and the world around them, but also their reflection out of game, in the real world and in their day-to-day experiences. The final sub-theme is the exploration of personal growth. All participants reflected on their personal growth within D&D. The majority of participants explained that D&D has helped them grow and realise things about themselves. They stated that whilst they were not specific moments, they did have smaller realizations about themselves as time went on and the longer they played for. Some participants mentioned specific traits and aspects of themselves that D&D has helped improve and explore, like creativity, confidence, and identity. And some participants stated that due to the fact that they've not been playing for very long, they have not experienced this growth yet, but they do expect to see some sort of growth in themselves as they continue to play. Some example quotes from Theme 3, Empathy, with the first sub-theme being empathy towards others. One participant mentioned they believe that D&D players are empathetic by nature, but most participants explained that D&D has helped improve their empathy levels and also awareness of empathy overall, despite some participants only playing for a short period of time. For the final sub-theme, all participants expressed that their awareness and empathy improved in relation to individuals from marginalised communities, such as race, gender, social class, or sexual identity. Most participants discussed how they interact with people from marginalised groups as the player, but also as their character, and how Dungeons & Dragons is a very diverse game, where you meet people from various backgrounds. Participants also stated how they experience racism and discrimination in the game due to their character's race and identity, which has increased their empathy, understanding, and awareness towards individuals from marginalised communities in the real world. Lastly, here are some quotes from the final theme of benefits and risk. All participants stated that D&D helped increase their creativity and socialization, explaining how they're able to be more creative and imaginative when creating characters, their backstories, and the worlds that they're in, and explaining how they're able to socialize with current friends and meet new people through D&D, with D&D even helping one participant through their social isolation. The next sub-theme is escapism. Around half of the participants described that D&D provides a distraction and an escape from the real world and its stressors. The last sub-theme is risk. Some participants added this information to the end of the interview. When they were asked if they wanted to add anything they feel has not been asked, 3 of the participants went on to discuss the potential risks of Dungeons & Dragons. These participants explained the importance of having a good DM, and that while D&D can provide many benefits, it can also bring some risks of emotional harm or discrimination to players. So what do the results mean? The next few slides break down the results, my interpretation, and the implications of them on the real world. Starting off with Theme 1. The results from Theme 1 explore the notion that D&D can provide a safe space for players, where they can explore their personality through their characters. This mirrors previous research conducted by Cusso and Quinlan, Howell, and Walsh and Linen, also exploring the safe space within Dungeons & Dragons and the importance of that space. This then has the implication that D&D seems to be an effective tool for practicing creating that safe space, as there are similarities between the safe space in D&D and the safe space in counselling, creating a space to allow for exploration of thoughts, feelings, and behaviours. However, the difference between the two would be that what is explored in counselling could have an impact on the client's life, but using D&D could promote exploration in a fantasy world and keeping it there. Participants also explained that they were able to put themselves into their character's shoes and explore the world from their perspective, allowing the opportunity for counsellors to use this to benefit their interactions with their clients. Moving on to Theme 2. According to Morin, reflection and personal growth are both signs of self-awareness. All the participants mentioned that experience of reflection went hand in hand with their personal growth. All participants reflected on their growth in relation to their characters, and then linking that growth to real life, with some finding that D&D has promoted regular reflection in their day-to-day life. This also mirrors previous research conducted by Miralainen, showing that D&D does have an impact on the growth of players in relation to self-awareness, providing a good starting point for counsellors to develop their self-awareness and empathy skills. Is Theme 3. All participants found that interacting with others really helped improving their empathy. They felt as though that by interacting with others, friends, and new people from marginalised groups, that they really improved their awareness, understanding, and empathy. Some participants said they felt like their levels of self-awareness and empathy were the same after playing D&D than they were before, but because of D&D, they're meeting new people outside of the game who are from diverse backgrounds, but also interacting with other characters and NPCs in the game who are also from diverse backgrounds, stating that it's broadened their horizons and allowed the space for them to discuss different topics within the group, either in-game or out. Results from this study is similar to results from a study conducted by Ma et al., discussing the fantasy genre in general, and people who read fantasy books have an increase in empathy. As D&D is a form of oral storytelling, there are some similarities between the two studies. Results are also similar to the results from the Rivers et al. Study mentioned earlier. Lastly, the results from Theme 4 show many benefits for D&D players. Creative and social benefits were the two key benefits identified, and some participants play for the escapism, to be able to distract themselves from their day-to-day. It shows that D&D is a beneficial tool to promote self-care and coming away from the stresses faced in day-to-day life. While there are many benefits, there are also some risks involved. Some participants emphasize that having a bad DM leads to disengagement and a reluctance to play, as well as the potential to create a harmful and destructive environment for players. This is something to consider for the use of D&D as a training tool. If D&D were to be used as a training tool for trainee counsellors, the DM for any campaign created would need to be able to create a warm and safe space for the players to be able to freely explore, allowing those trainee counsellors to explore themselves, to explore other people's perspectives, and to improve their self-awareness and empathy. That space is highly critical. As I was analysing the results, some limitations became clear. One limitation of the study is that we are relying on the participants' memory, relying on them to remember specific examples of situations that's happened to them in-game, especially examples related to questions asking about empathy and personal growth. In my opinion, this is a limitation because if participants were able to provide specific examples of empathy, self-awareness, and personal growth in-game, there could be a comparison of these events and examples to see if there's anything in particular that could help with the increase of self-awareness or empathy skills, to see if a way that maybe a campaign could be created with these particular scenarios to help with that improvement. A way to potentially gain specific examples could be to change the study from an interview to a focus group, allowing participants to have more time to think about specific examples, but also for participants to bounce ideas off of each other. One participant could mention a specific example, but that could encourage another participant to think of their own example. Another change that could be made could be changing the study entirely to include a short campaign for the participants to complete, by giving the participants specific examples where they would need to show self-awareness, empathy, or growth, and then discuss these scenarios in an interview or focus group. By adding specific examples, we could see if any of those examples helped with the increase of self-awareness or empathy skills, leading to a further training tool for trainee counsellors. Limitation that came up from this study is the concept of time. All participants showed a growth in self-awareness and empathy, but participants who showed the most growth were the participants who have been playing for years. It seems that time has an impact on the level of development, which raises the consideration of how long someone would have to play for to notice an improvement. I know that improvement of skills is very personal and very subjective, but exploring a potential baseline of a time period could be beneficial to trainee counsellors, as would trainee counsellors want to play a long-term campaign to improve their skills if they could play for a month and see the beginnings of that improvement. It's just something to consider for future research, as finding that sort of baseline I think would be beneficial. A consideration for future research is something that came up during the interviews. A few participants often mention that they play an online RPG, Baldur's Gate 3. As this study is limited to only exploring self-awareness and empathy within Dungeons & Dragons, it could be worth potentially repeating this study but with a focus on online RPGs, like Baldur's Gate 3. Could players experience the same increase in self-awareness and empathy from an online RPG compared to Dungeons & Dragons? This also raises the consideration of other genres of RPG. Is the development and improvement of self-awareness and empathy limited to the fantasy genre in general? Conducting the same study but changing the focus to other genres or online fantasy RPGs could be beneficial to then compare the results from all three studies to find which best encourages the most development of self-awareness and empathy, which can then be used to find the best modality to be used as a developmental tool for trainee counsellors wanting to improve their self-awareness and empathy. A message then from this study, Dungeons & Dragons seems to have a lasting impact on the improvement of self-awareness and empathy skills. This can be utilised to develop training tools for trainee counsellors to improve their own self-awareness and empathy skills, as well as building on their other skills like creating a safe space and to experience other people's perspectives. That brings us to the end of my presentation. Thank you all so much for listening, and please leave any comments or questions that you may have in the comment section below, and I will reply to them as soon as I can. Thank you all once again for listening, and I hope you enjoyed. That brings us to the end of my presentation. Thank you all so much for listening, and please leave any comments or questions that you may have in the comment section below, and I will reply to them as soon as I can. Thank you all once again for listening, and I hope you enjoyed. Are some references that I used throughout the presentation.